The ice beneath Olivia's boots gave way with a sound like thunder splitting the earth, and in the single heartbeat before she plunged into the freezing water of the creek, she understood she was going to die. The Dakota Territory winter of 1882 showed no mercy to anyone foolish enough to trust a thaw-weakened crossing, and as the frigid water closed over her head, dragging her under the solid sheet above, every nerve in her body screamed in white-hot agony that felt paradoxically like burning. Her heavy wool coat became an anchor, her skirts wrapped around her legs like iron chains, and the current swept her sideways beneath the ice where no light penetrated, where her frantically scrabbling fingers found only the smooth, unyielding underside of her frozen tomb. Olivia Edwards had come to Sioux Falls 3 months earlier to teach at the newly established schoolhouse. A spinster at 22 with honey-colored hair and gray eyes that her mother back in Philadelphia had always said were too serious for a woman. She had wanted adventure, wanted to matter in a place where educated women were scarce and desperately needed. She had not wanted this, lungs burning, vision darkening, the terrible silence of the water filling her ears as her body began to shut down from the cold. Samuel Olsen heard the crack from 50 yards away where he was checking his fence line. The sound carried across the snow-covered prairie with crystalline clarity, and something in that sharp report made his gut clench with intuition. He was 24, a cattle rancher who had staked his claim 2 years prior with money saved from 6 years of trail drives and hard living. His father had been Norwegian, his mother a tough Dakota woman who had taught him to listen to the land, and right now the land was screaming that something was wrong. He urged his bay gelding into a gallop, snow flying up around them, his breath coming in clouds of white vapor. When he reached the creek crossing, he saw the dark hole in the ice and the scatter of footprints leading right to its edge. Without thinking, without even dismounting, he scanned the ice downstream and saw it, a dark shape visible through a thinner section about 20 feet from the break, moving sluggishly with the current beneath the surface. Samuel hit the ground running, pulling the rope from his saddle as he went. He did not test the ice, did not waste time with caution. He could see the shape was a person, could see the way they had stopped moving, and he knew that every second meant the difference between life and death. The ice groaned under his weight as he threw himself flat and crawled toward the thinner section, distributing his bulk as best he could. The cold bit through his clothes instantly, but he ignored it, focusing only on the dark mass beneath the surface. He smashed through the thin ice with his elbow, then his fist, again and again until his knuckles bled and the hole was large enough. The water was so cold it felt like knives on his exposed skin. He plunged his arm in up to the shoulder and grabbed fabric, wool, anything he could catch, and hauled with every ounce of strength in his body. The woman who emerged was limp and blue-lipped, her eyes closed, ice crystals already forming in her soaked hair. Samuel dragged her across the ice toward the shore, not bothering with gentleness, only speed. When they reached solid ground, he turned her on her side and water poured from her mouth. She was not breathing. He had seen a drowned cowhand pulled from a river once, had watched an old trail boss pound on the man's back and breathe into his lungs until he coughed back to life. Samuel did the same now, tilting her head back, covering her cold mouth with his own, breathing his warmth and air into her still body. He pressed on her chest the way he had seen done, counting, breathing, pressing, over and over while his own body began to shake from the cold of his soaked sleeve and the adrenaline coursing through him. "Come on," he said through gritted teeth. "Come on, lady, breathe." She convulsed suddenly, water streaming from her mouth as she choked and gasped. Her eyes flew open, gray and wild with terror and confusion. She tried to speak but only managed a rattling wheeze. "I have got you," Samuel said, already stripping off his heavy coat. He wrapped it around her, knowing she was far from safe yet. Hypothermia would kill her just as surely as drowning if he did not get her warm immediately. His ranch was 2 miles away. The town was closer, maybe a mile, but he did not know if she would last that long in her sodden clothes in this wind. He made the decision in an instant. He lifted her onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and kicked the gelding toward town, holding her against his chest, trying to share what little warmth he had. She was shaking violently now, which he took as a good sign. It meant her body was still fighting. "Stay with me," he said into her ear. "What is your name?" "Oh, Olivia," she managed through chattering teeth. "Edwards." "The schoolteacher," he said, recognition dawning. He had seen her from a distance in town, had heard the talk about the pretty young woman from the East who had come to educate their children. "I am Samuel Olsen." "You are going to be all right, Miss Edwards. We are almost there." The town doctor, a gruff man named Hendricks who had served as a field surgeon during the war, took one look at them and barked orders. Samuel found himself banished to the outer room while the doctor and his wife stripped Olivia's frozen clothes and wrapped her in warm blankets, surrounding her with heated stones wrapped in cloth. He sat on a wooden bench, still shaking himself, staring at his torn and bloody knuckles without really seeing them. An hour later, Dr. Hendricks emerged. "She will live," he said. "Thanks to you. Another minute under that ice and we would be planning a funeral." Samuel felt something unlock in his chest, tension he had not realized he was holding. "Can I see her? She is asking for you," the doctor said with a meaningful look. "Seems she wants to thank the man who saved her life." Olivia was propped up in the bed, still pale but with color returning to her lips. Her hair had been dried and hung loose around her shoulders, darker than he had realized, almost brown in this light. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "You saved my life," she said, her voice rough and raw. "I was drowning and you pulled me out." "I heard the ice crack," Samuel said, feeling suddenly awkward standing in the doorway. "Anyone would have done the same. But you did it," she insisted. "You broke through the ice with your bare hands. Mrs. Hendricks told me. She said your knuckles are shredded." He looked down at his bandaged hands, flexing them experimentally. They hurt like hell, but he had endured worse. "They will heal." "I do not even know how to begin to thank you," Olivia said, and there was something in her eyes, a depth of feeling that made his breath catch. "You risked your own life without hesitation." "I could not just let you drown," he said simply. "I am glad you are all right, Miss Edwards." She held his gaze for a long moment, and he felt something pass between them, some wordless acknowledgement of the bond forged in those desperate minutes by the creek. He had held her life in his hands, had breathed his own breath into her lungs, and now they were connected in a way that transcended the normal boundaries of strangers. Dr. Hendricks insisted Olivia stay another day for observation, and Samuel found himself inventing reasons to return to town. He brought her books from the general store, claiming he thought she might be bored. He brought wildflowers that he had somehow found blooming in a sheltered spot near his ranch, despite the lingering winter. Each time he visited, they talked longer, discovering shared interests and compatible temperaments. Olivia told him about Philadelphia, about her family and her decision to come west. "My father thought I was insane," she said. "He wanted me to marry Mr. Harrison, a banker's son with excellent prospects and absolutely no imagination. I wanted more than tea parties and calling cards. I wanted to make a difference." "And do you regret it?" Samuel asked. "Coming here, I mean, nearly dying in a frozen creek." She smiled, and it transformed her serious face into something luminous. Ask me again in a few days when I can feel my toes. But no, I do not regret it. How could I when it brought me here to this moment? He felt his heart kick hard against his ribs. You might feel differently when the shock wears off. I do not think so, she said softly. I think perhaps I was meant to fall through that ice. I think perhaps you were meant to hear it. Samuel had never been a man who believed much in fate or destiny. Life on the frontier was too hard and random for such romanticism. But sitting there in the fading afternoon light, watching the way the sun caught the gold in Olivia's hair, he found himself willing to reconsider. When she was released back to her small room behind the schoolhouse, Samuel made a point of checking on her regularly. It started as simple concern for her welfare, making sure she had fully recovered, but it quickly became something more. He found himself timing his trips to town to coincide with the end of the school day, waiting outside like one of the children he had once been, hoping for a glimpse of her, a few words of conversation. The town noticed. In a place as small as Sioux Falls, nothing remained private for long. The ladies of the church began inviting them both to the same social gatherings. The proprietor of the general store teased Samuel about his suddenly frequent need for supplies. The children at school whispered and giggled when he appeared at the door. I am causing you trouble, Samuel said one April afternoon as they walked along the creek, carefully avoiding the spot where she had fallen through. The ice was long gone now, replaced by rushing meltwater and the first green shoots of spring. People are talking. Let them talk, Olivia said, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. I do not care what they say. They will expect me to court you properly, he said, trying to keep his tone light even as his pulse hammered, with intentions toward marriage. She stopped walking and turned to face him. And do you have such intentions, Mr. Olsen? He looked down at her, at this woman who had come into his life through the most dramatic circumstances imaginable, who had somehow worked her way into his thoughts and dreams until he could not imagine his days without her in them. I do, he said. If you would have me, I know I am just a rancher and you come from a cultured family back east. I cannot offer you the kind of life you are accustomed to. I do not want the life I am accustomed to, Olivia said fiercely. I want this life. I want you, Samuel. I have wanted you since I opened my eyes and saw you leaning over me, since I realized you had fought death itself to bring me back. He kissed her then, there beside the rushing creek with the spring sun warm on their faces. It was his first kiss, and he suspected it was hers as well, clumsy and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling. I should speak to your father, Samuel said. Ask his permission properly. We are in the Dakota Territory, Olivia laughed, and I am 22 years old. I do not need his permission. But if you want to write to him, I am sure he will be relieved I am marrying anyone at all after the scandal of my running off to become a teacher. They married in June, when the prairie was gold with wildflowers and the sky stretched forever in all directions. The ceremony took place in the small church, with most of the town in attendance. Olivia wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and Samuel wore his best suit, the one he had brought from Norway as a child and had barely grown into. When he slipped the plain gold band onto her finger, his hands shook slightly, and she steadied them with her own, her gray eyes shining with love and certainty. The first year of their marriage was an education for both of them. Olivia continued teaching at the schoolhouse through the fall term, riding out to the ranch each evening where Samuel would be waiting. She learned to manage a household on the frontier, to cook over a wood stove, to preserve vegetables and meat for the long winter. Samuel learned that having a wife meant companionship in the evenings, someone to talk through the challenges of the day, someone whose opinion mattered as much as his own. The winter tested them. The blizzards that year were fierce and frequent, and more than once they found themselves snowed in for days at a time. But they had each other, and the small ranch house that Samuel had built with his own hands became a haven of warmth and intimacy. They read together by lamplight, Olivia introducing him to novels and poetry he had never encountered. He taught her to play chess with a set carved from antler bone. They made love and talked late into the night and discovered all the small daily rhythms that bind two lives into one. In the spring, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He was silent for a long moment, processing the information, and then he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, though she could feel his joy in the way he held her. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said into her hair. "You have given me everything, Olivia. A home, a family, a reason to build something that matters. I love you more than I have words to express." The pregnancy was difficult. Olivia suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and Samuel worried constantly, remembering how close he had come to losing her once already. But she was strong, stronger than she looked, and she bore the discomfort with grace and humor. Their son was born in January of 1884, 2 years almost to the day after Samuel had pulled Olivia from beneath the ice. The labor was long and frightening, and Samuel paced the kitchen while Mrs. Hendricks attended to his wife in the bedroom. When he finally heard the baby's cry, thin and reedy but unmistakably alive, he felt tears stream down his face. Mrs. Hendricks emerged carrying a tiny bundle. "You have a son," she said, "a healthy boy, and your wife is asking for you." Olivia was pale and exhausted, but her eyes were bright when Samuel entered the room. She held their son against her chest, the baby already rooting for milk. "Look what we made," she said softly. "Is he not perfect?" Samuel knelt beside the bed, touching one finger to the baby's impossibly small hand. The infant's fingers wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Samuel agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son's red face and dark hair, Olivia said, "James, after your father." "James Olsen," Samuel said, testing it out. "I like it. James Edwards Olsen." The years that followed were full and rich. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's gray eyes and his father's Norwegian blonde hair. The ranch prospered as Samuel added more cattle and built up his herd. Olivia stopped teaching at the schoolhouse and focused on their home and family, though she never lost her love of books and learning. In 1886, their daughter was born, a tiny thing with a shock of dark hair that they named Margaret. 2 years after that came another son, Peter, who was colicky and difficult but who grew into a sweet-natured child. Their home was full of noise and laughter and the organized chaos of family life. Samuel expanded the house, adding rooms to accommodate their growing family. He built Olivia a study where she could read and write, with windows that looked out over the prairie. She filled it with books ordered from catalogs, with papers and pens, and she began writing articles about frontier life that were published in Eastern magazines. Her vivid descriptions of the Dakota Territory brought her a small but dedicated following of readers. The land around Sioux Falls was changing. More settlers arrived every year, drawn by the promise of the Homestead Act and the spread of the railroad. The wild prairie was being carved into farms and ranches, the open range disappearing behind fences and property lines. Samuel watched the changes with mixed feelings, understanding that progress was inevitable while mourning the loss of the untamed landscape he had first encountered as a young man. Through it all, the love between Samuel and Olivia only deepened. They still walked beside the creek sometimes in the evenings, after the children were asleep, holding hands and talking about their days. Olivia would point out the exact spot where she had fallen through the ice all those years ago, the spot that had become the hinge point of their lives. You ever think about what would have happened if you had not been checking that fence line that day? She asked one summer night when the fireflies were dancing over the water. I try not to, Samuel said honestly. It terrifies me to think how easily I might have missed you, how different everything would be. I think you would have found me eventually, Olivia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Maybe not that day, maybe not that way, but somehow, we were meant to find each other. I am not sure I believe in meant to, Samuel said, but I believe in you, I believe in us. I believe in the life we have built together. As their children grew, Samuel made sure they all knew the story of how their parents met. He told them about the crack of the ice and the desperate race against time, about breathing life back into their mother's lungs on the frozen shore. James, the eldest, loved the story and begged to hear it over and over. Margaret preferred the parts about the courtship and the wedding. Peter, the youngest, just liked knowing that his father was a hero. The years turned into decades. James grew up and took over more of the ranch work, proving himself a capable and dedicated rancher. Margaret surprised everyone by announcing her intention to become a doctor, inspired by Dr. Hendricks, who had saved her mother's life. Peter became a teacher like his mother, taking a position at a school in Rapid City. Samuel and Olivia grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces marking the passage of time. But they still looked at each other with the same love and wonder they had felt in those early days. They still held hands. They still talked late into the night. They still walked beside the creek when the weather was fine. In 1910, 28 years after Samuel had pulled Olivia from beneath the ice, they celebrated their anniversary with their 3 children, their 8 grandchildren, and half the town of Sioux Falls. It was a grand party held at the ranch, with tables laden with food and a fiddle band playing on the porch. Samuel stood with Olivia under the stars, watching their family dance and laugh together, and felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. "We did well," Olivia said, reading his thoughts as she so often did. "Look at all of this, Samuel. Look at what came from that single moment." "I would do it again in a heartbeat," he said. "Break through that ice 1,000 times if it meant having this life with you." She kissed him there in front of God and everyone, a kiss that still made his heart race after nearly 3 decades. "I love you," she said. "Thank you for hearing that crack. Thank you for not hesitating. Thank you for every day since." "I love you too," he said. "Always have, always will." The party continued long into the night, but Samuel and Olivia slipped away after a while, walking their familiar path down to the creek. The water ran smooth and gentle in the summer warmth, nothing like the dangerous ice-bound torrent it had been that winter day so long ago. They sat on the bank, their shoulders touching, listening to the sounds of their family celebrating in the distance. "You have any regrets?" Samuel asked. "About leaving Philadelphia, about choosing this life?" "Not a single one," Olivia said firmly. "This is exactly where I was meant to be. With you, with our family, with this land that has become as much a part of me as my own heartbeat." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the moon rise over the prairie. Finally, Samuel spoke. "I was terrified that day, you know. When I was trying to break through the ice to reach you. I did not know if I would be fast enough. I did not know if you would survive even if I pulled you out. But I knew I had to try. I could not live with myself if I did not try. And because you did, "We got all of this," Olivia said, gesturing toward the ranch house where lights still blazed and music still played. "Every moment of happiness, every challenge we faced together, every child and grandchild, all of it came from your courage in that single moment." "Our courage," Samuel corrected. "You fought to survive, too. You could have given up under that ice, let yourself drift away, but you fought. And you kept fighting through the cold and the water in your lungs and everything after. We both fought for this life." As they walked back to the house, hand in hand like they had walked thousands of times before, Samuel thought about the randomness of life, about how one moment could change everything. If he had been checking a different section of fence that day, if he had been delayed even by a few minutes, if Olivia had chosen a different route to town, their paths might never have crossed. She might have died beneath that ice, and he would have lived his life never knowing what he had missed. But instead, they had found each other in the most dramatic way possible, and from that desperate beginning had built something beautiful and lasting. Their love had survived harsh winters and scorching summers, financial hardships and the countless challenges of frontier life. It had produced children and grandchildren, had enriched their community, had created ripples that would extend far beyond their own lifetimes. The party eventually wound down, and their children and grandchildren departed for their own homes. James kissed his mother's cheek and shook his father's hand, promising to return for Sunday dinner. Margaret hugged them both tightly, whispering that she had news about a new position at a hospital in Chicago. Peter lingered longest, talking with his father about the state of the ranch and his plans for the school. Finally, Samuel and Olivia were alone in their bedroom, preparing for sleep as they had done thousands of nights before. Samuel watched his wife brush out her long gray hair, still thick and beautiful despite the years, and felt a rush of gratitude so intense it almost brought him to his knees. "What is it?" Olivia asked, seeing his expression in the mirror. "I am just thinking about how lucky I am," he said. "How lucky we are." She set down her brush and came to him, cupping his face in her hands. "Not luck," she said. "Love. Commitment, the choice we make every day to stay together, to work through the hard times, to celebrate the good ones. That is not luck, my darling. That is us." He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "I would change nothing," he said. "Not one single moment." "Neither would I," she said. "Even the scary parts, even the hard parts, it all led us here." They climbed into bed together, as they had done for 28 years, fitting together like two pieces of a puzzle. Samuel wrapped his arms around his wife, holding her close, and felt her relax into sleep against him. He stayed awake a while longer, listening to her breathe, thinking about the ice and the crack and the desperate race to save her life. He had not known her name that day, had not known she would become his wife, the mother of his children, his partner in all things. He had simply heard a sound that his instincts told him meant danger, and he had acted. Everything else had followed from that single act of courage and compassion. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Winters came and went, each one a little easier than the last as modern conveniences slowly made their way to the Dakota Territory. The ranch thrived under James's management, and Samuel found himself with more time to spend with Olivia, to travel a bit, to visit their children and watch their grandchildren grow. On their 35th anniversary, James surprised them with a photograph session. A photographer had come all the way from Rapid City with his equipment, and he set up in front of the ranch house to capture the family. Samuel stood with Olivia at the center, their children and grandchildren arranged around them, 3 generations of Olsens who existed because of a crack in the ice and a cowboy who had chosen to investigate. The photograph captured them all, frozen in time like Olivia had once been frozen beneath the ice. But there was so much life in their faces, so much love and connection and shared history. When the photograph was developed and framed, Samuel hung it in their bedroom where they could see it every day, in the evenings when the work was done and the light was fading. Samuel and Olivia would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the prairie they had made their home. They would hold hands and talk about their day, about their children and grandchildren, about the memories they had accumulated over the years. And sometimes they would talk about that winter day in 1882, about the ice and the water and the moment when everything changed. "I died that day," Olivia said once. "I was dead and you brought me back. You gave me not just my life, but this life. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you." "No," Samuel said firmly. "You gave yourself this life. You chose to come west. You chose to cross that creek. You chose to fight to survive. You chose me when you could have gone back to Philadelphia and married that banker's son. Every choice was yours. Then we gave each other this life," Olivia compromised. "Together, we built something neither of us could have built alone." "That I will agree with," Samuel said, kissing her temple. "Together, we are more than the sum of our parts." As they grew older still, their roles gradually reversed. Samuel, who had always been strong and capable, began to slow down. His joints ached in the winter and he tired more easily. Olivia, who had once been the one needing rescue, became his caretaker, helping him with tasks that had once been second nature. "The rescuer needs rescuing now," Samuel joked one day when she helped him with his boots. "We take turns," Olivia said with a smile. "That is what partnership means. Sometimes you save me, sometimes I save you. It all evens out in the end." Their love remained constant through all the changes. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with time, like wine aging in a barrel. They knew each other completely, could finish each other's sentences, could communicate with just a glance. They had weathered every storm together and emerged stronger each time. In 1920, they celebrated their 38th anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. Their children had offered to throw another party, but Samuel and Olivia declined. They wanted this night to themselves, to remember and reflect on all they had shared. 38 years, Olivia said, raising her glass. "Who would have thought, when you pulled me out of that creek, that we would be here now?" "I think I knew," Samuel said. "Maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep down, when I was breathing air into your lungs and willing you to live, I knew you were meant to be mine. I knew I would spend the rest of my life loving you." "I knew it too," Olivia admitted. "When I opened my eyes and saw your face, I had never seen you before, did not know your name, but I felt this instant connection, this certainty that you were important, that we were important, together." They ate their dinner slowly, savoring each bite and each moment. They talked about their children and grandchildren, about the changes they had seen in the territory over the decades, about the life they had built on this patch of prairie. And they talked about the future, about the legacy they would leave behind. "I want our grandchildren to know the story," Samuel said. "Not just the dramatic parts about the ice, but everything after. The courtship and the wedding and the years of building this ranch and raising our family. I want them to understand that love is not just a single heroic moment. It is all the small moments after, the daily choices to stay and work and grow together." "They will know," Olivia promised. "Our story will live on through them, through their children and grandchildren. We started something here, Samuel, something that will endure long after we are gone." They finished their dinner and moved to the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket against the cool spring evening. The stars were brilliant overhead, the Milky Way a river of light across the dark sky. Samuel held Olivia close, feeling the familiar shape of her body against his, and thought about time and love and the strange paths life takes. "If I could go back," he said quietly, "back to that day when I was a young man checking fence lines, and if I could tell that young man what was waiting for him, what he would find when he heard that crack in the ice, I do not think he would believe me. The richness of it all, the depth of joy and sorrow and life, it is more than anyone could imagine." "Would you warn him?" Olivia asked. "About the hard parts, the struggles, the times when money was tight and the future uncertain?" "No," Samuel said without hesitation. "I would not change a single thing. The hard parts made the good parts sweeter. The struggles made us stronger, and all of it, every moment, was worth it for the privilege of loving you." Olivia turned in his arms to kiss him, a kiss that held 38 years of love and devotion and partnership. "Thank you," she whispered against his lips. "Thank you for hearing that crack. Thank you for not hesitating. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you for fighting to survive," he said. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for every day of these 38 years." They sat together under the stars until the night grew too cold, then went inside to their warm house, their comfortable bed, their shared life. And in the morning, they woke up together as they had done for 38 years, ready to face whatever the new day would bring. Their love story had begun with ice and water and desperate fear, but it had become something warm and enduring and infinitely precious. From a moment of crisis had come a lifetime of partnership. From a stranger's courage had come a family's legacy. From the sound of cracking ice had come everything that mattered. And as Samuel held Olivia through the night, listening to her breathe, feeling the steady rhythm of her heart, he knew that he would make the same choice again and again, in every lifetime, in every world. He would always hear that crack. He would always come running. He would always pull her from the ice and breathe life back into her lungs, because she was his destiny, his partner, his love. And their story, born in a frozen moment of terror, had become a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and enduring love. The years continued to pass gently for Samuel and Olivia. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin families of their own, making them great-grandparents and filling their lives with even more joy. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through James and then his eldest son. The land that Samuel had claimed and built upon would remain an Olsen ranch for generations to come, a living monument to everything they had created together. On their 40th anniversary, all of their descendants gathered at the ranch for a celebration that lasted 3 days. There were children running everywhere, young parents chasing toddlers, teenagers rolling their eyes at family stories they had heard 100 times. Samuel and Olivia sat in places of honor, watching it all with wonder and pride. The youngest great-grandchild, barely 2 years old, climbed into Olivia's lap and patted her cheek with pudgy hands. Olivia held her close, breathing in that unique baby smell, and caught Samuel's eye across the room. The look they shared spoke volumes about the journey they had taken together, about the legacy they were leaving behind. That night, after everyone had finally settled down to sleep in various corners of the house and outbuildings, Samuel and Olivia took their last walk down to the creek. It was summer, warm and gentle, with the sound of crickets filling the air. They moved slowly now, their steps careful, but they still made the journey to the spot that had become sacred to them. 40 years ago, I pulled you out of this creek, Samuel said, looking at the water flowing peacefully past. You were blue and lifeless, and I thought I had lost you before I even knew you. And now look at us. Look at everything that has come from that moment. I think about it sometimes, Olivia said softly. About how thin the line was between life and death, between everything we have and nothingness. If you had been delayed even a minute, if you had not heard the crack, If you had decided it was not worth investigating, everything would be different. But I did hear it, Samuel said. I did come running. I did pull you out, and I have never regretted a single moment of what followed. Neither have I, Olivia said. This life, this love, this family, it has been more than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me all of this, Samuel. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. And you saved me right back, he said. Before you, I was just existing, working my ranch, building something but not knowing why. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to build a future instead of just surviving the present. You made me whole. They stood together by the creek as the moon rose. Two people who had been young and strong when they met, and were now old and weathered, but no less devoted. The love that had sparked between them on that desperate winter day had only grown and deepened, becoming the foundation of everything good in their lives. We should head back, Olivia finally said. The house is full of people who will worry if we are gone too long. Let them worry a little, Samuel said with a smile. I want just a few more minutes here, just you and me and the memories. So they stayed, holding each other beside the creek where their story had begun, where Olivia had nearly died and where their love had been born. And when they finally walked back to the house, they did so with the certainty that whatever time they had left, whether it was years or months or days, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything for the past 40 years. Their love story, born in ice and terror, had become something eternal, something that would echo through their descendants for generations to come. And that was more than enough. That was everything.